Yeah, of course. Hey everyone, I hope everyone's doing well. My name is JB. I work at Anthropic at on the Claude Code team, and so I build some of the features that you might see in Claude Code, such as like the VS Code extension, checkpointing, some of the general like performance work, like speeding it up. And so hope you've been enjoying using Claude Code. Excited to hear your questions and hope I can answer any questions that you might have about Claude Code, about Anthropic, about AI. I'm happy to talk about anything.
Hello. Okay, let's get start. Hold on. So I think you have a question here, right?
The question about system prompt design Claude Code, I wondering to know about who the design, the personality, and the morality about the code, Claude Code, yeah, and safety guard of your system.
Yeah, so we actually have a bunch, several people working on it. A lot of the prompts actually come from Boris, who sort of started Claude Code, and I think he wrote the initial set of like tool prompts as well as the system prompt. And we usually have like people in Safeguard. So we also have a different Safeguard team, a red teaming team, who actually looks through the prompts, who reads through the prompts and edits it, adds safety scenarios, and then we have teams that actually test the capability to see like at what threat level we sort of put it in. So now we're at ASL3, but it really also depends on both the model as well as like the Claude Code harness. And so I guess the short answer is several different groups of people. Usually the prompt starts with like the Claude Code team, one of us sort of come up with the first draft, and then we edit it based on like the feedback that we get. We edit it based on what the Safeguard team comes back to us with. And so after a couple of like editing, a couple of iterations, then we release it. But it usually comes from us first.
Okay, next question.
Hi, JB. I found you on LinkedIn. I'm coming from tonight. There was actually a meetup with from TaiPi. It's a monthly Python meetup that we have in Bangkok. 30 to 40 people every month, and several times a year we have a vibe coding event where we are given problems and we all just vibe code as a group. And actually, we're looking for sponsors, and we wanted to see if. Not a joke, not a joke. No, but we were asking for potentially maybe a partnership with Anthropic, even just as simple as keys for that night for us all to have access to an LLM just for a vibe coding problem. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to connect with you on LinkedIn, and maybe we can talk there. Would you accept my request, and could we talk there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should speak with Derek. I think Derek sort of organized some of these stuff, and so may be able to help you set that up. I mean, I myself am an engineer, and so I don't have on about that kind of stuff.
I'm sorry. Speak with whom?
As an engineer, partnerships is not really my main like focus for work, and so it's going to be hard.
Yeah, no, I thought I heard you say speak with Eric. Is that what you said?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm an engineer, and so this is not my main area of focus.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions around Claude Code and stuff, but I myself do not handle the partnerships and/or hosting events and/or sponsoring events.
Okay. All right. Maybe you can point me in the right direction of who to speak to after the event.
Yeah, sure. Let's go to the next question.
Thank you.
So I have a question about the agent skills. Can you show me some example or show me the best practice to write the agent skill for Code?
What do you mean by agent queue? Agent skew?
It's the agent skill that you use with Cloud Code that.
Okay, yeah, like the skills. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so skills are interesting, and so skills are supported in both Cloud Code and outside of Cloud Code as well. It's in general something that we train into our models. And the idea behind skills is that there are so many different skills. It's sort of one of the things we crowdsource, and so you can download skills from online, and all it is basically just like a dynamically loaded prompt. And so someone else can write the prompt, and it basically loads dynamically. In the very beginning, it only takes the top part, so the description and the name of the skill that's actually in the system prompt. And then when that's actually required, it will actually load the entire contents of the skill, so you can use it as a prompt. And one thing that's interesting about skills is that, like in the future, I think one of the ways we think about it is that in the future, we may or may not be writing much less code. And instead of writing code, our jobs may be just to be writing prompts, right? And so skills is one way of basically allowing us to get to that world where we're focused more on writing prompts than writing code itself. And so instead of thinking about like, oh, hey, if I need to do something, I'm just going to write code to do it. In the future, it may become like, okay, I need to do something. I need to build a website. I need to make like a system that does billing. Instead of writing code, I just write prompt. And then the LLM will take that prompt and make working code out of it. And so I think skill in a future world where we look ahead where the model's getting better and the coding engines are getting better, it may be the case that skills are like, the skill and the way the prompts are packaged are like the future of how you write code. Like almost in a way, like right now you use like a programming library. In the future, you might just be like using a skill sort of as a library rather than just actually coding in the same way you use a library instead of actually writing the code yourself for certain functionalities.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. Okay, thank you.
Someone want to ask the question first? Or? Okay, so can you hear me? Yes. I have maybe a funny question. Which one is more important to you, model or harness? Like which one between, you know what I mean, like code or the model itself, which one is more important?
Right. I think that they're both very important. I think what we found is that the model and harness work together to achieve the goal. I think in a lot of ways, like, I think there is a distinction, but I think in a lot of ways they're kind of the same. In the sense that it's almost like if you think about it, like, if you look at the model itself, the model is considered as one giant thing. But if you look at the inside of the model, there are like different stages and different components. And so we group them together and call it a model. And then we group, something like Cloud Code together and call it a harness. But they're ultimately just different stages in the pipeline of the product that we deliver. And in my opinion, both the model and the harness are very important. And I think the model and harness work together to actually give you the agentic coding results that you see with Cloud Code. And so in a lot of ways that I think both are extremely important. And so it's hard to say. Although the model, as you can think, it's actually a little bit more, like you can use it for more than just like with the harness. Like you can actually use it on Cloud.ai, you can use it like as an API, and so it's a little bit more general purpose than the specific harness with Cloud Code.
Thank you.
Okay, hi. So we got a question from our audience from the YouTube. So there is a question: how many lines of the code in Cloud Code are generated from the Cloud Code?
Oh yeah, we use Cloud Code a lot to write the code for Cloud Code. I can't tell you the exact number of lines, but yeah, we use it a lot, and a lot of it obviously we like review it, we test it, and we ourselves. I think, you know, like any other sort of thing that we code and like what we recommend, it usually makes sense for you to have the LLM write the code first, and then you review it as a person. And then you make sure everything makes sense, you try to understand it, and then you test it out to make sure all is good before you submit it. And that's usually what we do as well. Like we rely on Cloud Code a lot in a lot of those areas, and then but then we do have humans sort of involved in like making sure the code is correct, making sure the code makes sense, you know, checking for like security, checking for safeguards, and checking for all those things. Along the line, but yeah, we do use Cloud Code a lot, like a lot. Hard to say what the percentage is, but a huge part of Cloud Code is written by Cloud Code.
Okay, so the next question is how unpopular or unique techniques to use the code or AI efficiently?
So the let me repeat the question. The techniques to use Cloud AI efficiently?
Yeah, your techniques or your unpopular techniques.
Yeah. I would say I think, you know, there are using Cloud Code correctly or efficiently is a skill in itself. I think when I first started, I struggled to, well, not struggled. I think there's several things. The model wasn't as good when I started, but the models have gotten much better since I started a year and a half ago. The models are much more capable and likely to get even better in the future. But it is a skill, and I think there's several things involved. Like one is understanding what MCP tools to add to, what MCP tools and what skills and what commands to add to your workflow. And so we package these and we call them plugins. And so you can actually see there would be like an official plugin store that we have, and there are other sort of like third-party plugin stores, and those actually package some of the skills that we have. And so that includes like having it write your Git commit messages for you, to like doing a code review pass for you, and all those skills are useful in my daily workflow. I think another thing that is quite important is actually understanding the context that the model sees, and like really managing that context. And so we have several things that you use to control Claude, like Claude.md. The Claude.mds that you have, they're extremely important to curate what the model sees and what the model understands as you're working with it. And Claude.md also, we load several of them. So we load the Claude.md from the current directory up until your home directory. And so there is like a hierarchical structure to Claude.md. And so you can actually structure it so that each folder in your repository has different Claude.mds that gets loaded depending on which folder you start Claude in. And so understanding the context, like basically what's loaded into the conversation and the system prompt of Cloud Code, I think is extremely important to use it effectively. And I think it's sort of a skill that you learn as you use it more.
Hi, my name is Paul. I'd like you to explain more about the context management, because everyone agree that it's pain in the ass for everyone. Could you please give us a quick tips on that? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I think as I said before, Claude.md is extremely important for you to curate a good Claude.md. I think another thing we tend to do quite a lot, at least within Anthropic, is we have multiple Claudes. We usually just, instead of like continuing a single conversation on and on, we usually have like whenever we need to do a task that we can break down, we spin up a new Claude to do it. And we might do it in a separate like work tree, which is like a Git work tree, which is effectively like a copy of the repo. And so instead of having one single conversation that does everything, we have multiple conversations each with their own context that breaks down the tasks. And so in this way, you don't have like one single conversation with all the context that solves all your problems, because that gets harder for the model to effectively handle the context around all the different problems that you have. But instead, if you have multiple Claudes, like maybe 5 different Claudes working on 5 different problems, and each one is solving their own problems, then that way you don't end up having, the context between the different problems fill up and affect basically the task that you're trying to solve. And so I think effectively managing different contexts and adding different Claude instances for the problem you're trying to solve allows you to basically break up and use the context wisely to just solve that unique problem rather than trying to solve a problem that's way too big for the context and having a lot of unnecessary information in the context. Cool. Any other questions for follow-up there? I'm happy to talk about it too.
Hey, how's it going? Kelly. I guess my question is, first of all, I use Claude Code exclusively for my entire stack. Maybe 10% now is actually handwritten code. But my question is, I use work trees and all that great stuff, but I would really prefer to plan on, I use the planning mode quite a bit. I prefer to plan on my computer and hand off to Claude Web. But there's no after you plan, it's do you want to bypass or do you want to whatever? So how do you guys handle the planning locally and pushing it to the web is my question. Or are you coming out with that feature? Because that would be nice.
Yeah, I think it's likely something that we'll have. I need to check back if we've released it yet, but I think it's definitely a use case that's important that lets you push and pull from the web. Yeah, I think it's something we've definitely been exploring. Yeah, that's a great call. I think you're right in that the web is going to be a huge part for basically handing work off asynchronously and not having to worry about work trees locally.
Okay, so next question from our audience from the YouTube again. So the first question is, can the Claude code have a context larger than 200,000 token?
Yeah, I think that 200K is our normal context size, but we have released sort of experimental models. Not experimental, this was API, a larger context. And so we're playing around with that. It certainly is possible, but it isn't something that is in our main Claude Code for now. But we are looking into that as a possibility as some models can support larger context sizes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, how do you use multi-agents in your work?
Yeah, so we use it, I think it really depends on the use case. I think, as I said before, we could have basically multiple Claude instances. That's one way. And then within each Claude instance, there's also this idea of sub-agents. And sub-agents basically allow you to, I think that the best use case is for you to parallelize work. So what that means is that, for example, one thing I think it does pretty well is let's say there is an issue, so there's a crash somewhere in the code base, and I actually need to look at the past 100 different commits to ask Claude to look at the past 100 commits to try to find out where we introduced this bug. And so that's something a really common use case for sub-agents. And so what I usually would ask him to do is oh hey, Claude, can you spin up 10, 20 different sub-agents, look through the last 100 commits, and try to find the commits that are likely to have caused this bug. And it basically goes in and it tries to look at the last 100 commits to see what potentially caused the issue. And then it might come back with 3 or 5 possible commits. And then that way I can look into it and see, manually see which one potentially caused the bug. Although something like that is really helpful, because otherwise it would have taken me much longer to look through 100 different commits myself to try to find out what could have caused it. But that's one use case of sub-agents that's really useful is if you have easily parallelizable work that can break down, you can actually just tell Claude to spin up 10 different sub-agents. And the reason why it's not as good to ask Claude to look through 100 commits without sub-agents is that if it actually looked through 100 different commits by itself, it would be too much for the context to handle. And so by spinning up sub-agents, and each sub-agent taking on like a handful, like 5 to 10 different commits, then it wouldn't be too much. You would be basically breaking down the context again. And so each sub-agent will maybe identify one of the most likely causes for the crash, and then that way you'll be able to really synthesize and then look through a larger set of data. And so that's a really common use case for sub-agents.
Yeah, that would be from our question from the YouTube.
Yeah, so I think we have the time is almost over, right? Do you want to wrap up or speak anything to the Code Bangkok meetup?
Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming. Really excited to hear so many enthusiasm from Claude for Claude Code. I think we're working really hard to try to get some of these features to you, like the larger context sizes, some of the better management, including being able to we call it internally teleport, where you basically take your current session and send it to Claude Code Web. I think it's possible from the command line already. I don't know if we fully released it, but it's definitely coming up if it's not released. We're working on tons of different features, and we hope that you like it. I think, as I've said before, I think one thing that is quite important, and I kind of tell a lot of people about AI, is that I think internally, the more I use AI, I think the better I got at it. And so regardless of which AI you use, Claude Code or Codex or Gemini or whatever, I think it is quite important. I do think very strongly that the future of coding is through AI agents, because using it every day, I think it's just the increase in productivity is it's crazy, because I've been working in software for 20 years, and so it's hard to really see a world where we kind of go back to hand coding. And so in a lot of ways, it's good to basically start learning that skill of how to use AI effectively. I love that everyone is excited about Claude Code, but I do also understand that some people like different things. But regardless, the AI coding is a skill that's worth investing in, is my take.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Bye. Have a good day.